Visual to blindness.
You're dating someone who is sighted and the advantages that brings. But there are advantages. You know what I mean? If there's a couple and one person is sighted, that sighted person can drive. So that opens up some of the transportation things. It's just the truth. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I would never suggest that a blind person should date someone who's sighted because they're sighted. You know what I mean? And look at that as a goal. I would never not if I fell in love with a woman and she was blind, I would be with her and not think twice about it, and we would find a way. Because that's what we do. But I think, I think you have to acknowledge the fact that if one person in a relationship is sighted, it can be helpful. It's just helpful to have a pair of eyes around the house.
Thank you,
It really is. And people who don't acknowledge that, to me, it's just crazy because it's useful. It is.
Sure.
So but absolutely, as blind people, we can do all the things. It's funny. I have a good friend of mine. She's a very good friend of mine. I've known her for almost 25 years.
Okay.
And when I told her I lost my vision, she said to me, perfectly serious, she asked me, she said, "Can you still have sex?" And I said to her, I said, "If you turn the lights off, can you have sex?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, then so can I." I said, "It's only my eyes," But it was crazy because she was like, "Can you still have sex?" And she really thought I couldn't. And I was like, "Of course I can. It's no problem." But it was, it was funny to me. And she would kill me for saying that out loud to people. But it's, we of course we can, we date and we have sex, and some of us, and some people, you know what I mean, if you're blind and you've grown up in the blind world, maybe you went to here we have blind school, and a lot of students go to school with other people who are visually impaired or blind, and then and so that's who they date. You know what I mean? You're a teenager, you date the people that you go to school with, and if you go to blind school, then they're probably blind, and so that's who you're dating.
I see.
So, and that's just the way it works.
It is, yeah.
And and so, but yeah, and I've just talked around this for way too long. But absolutely, you can, as all of the relationship type of stuff, intimacy, dating, all those things. Of course you can do that, and of course you can be independent and have your own home with your partner, and and have children or not. Or if you choose not to have children, you can, or you can. But of course you can find a way, and maybe sometimes you might need some support from other people, but probably you don't even need that. It might be easier if you do. I know if even if it's a sighted couple, if you're raising a child, it's helpful to have family, in case both of you are working and you don't want to pay for childcare, or you want the child to be with a family member. It's helpful to have support to help you. That's true of any couple, whether we're blind or sighted.
I see.
But of course we can do these things.
Awesome. For sure. We can still do the same as other people do. Well,
of course.
I appreciate. And the last question.
Okay.
In our conversation, you mentioned something of employment towards people with low vision and total blind, and you mentioned almost 75% of partial sighted they don't have employment, but for total blind it's like 99%, of which is like 100%, close to 100%.
Yes,
you see.
Yeah.
So my question is, and this is the worldwide. It's not. Because as I said, I do interview with different people around the world.
Yes, that's worldwide.
That's the thing. And this happened in most countries. What do you think? What is the reason behind? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? People, they don't want to hire people who are low vision or total blinds, even if they have that level of education that they want or they require.
I think there's several reasons, honestly. a lot of times, like we were talking about before, sighted people think that blind people can't do anything. It's just because, and it's not their fault because they don't, I'm not saying it to blame them. It's their fault if we tell them we can do things and they continue to insist that we can. Then it's their fault because when you're being told something different and you don't listen, well, then you're wrong. But, for them to, because the only thing that they can do is relate to their own experience, and they imagine what they would do if they had no vision, and they can't imagine it because, like I said before, people are visual, and, so they can't imagine not having their sight. So that's what it is. A lot of times there's a level of kind of, they underestimate the skills that we have, and the abilities that we have. And also, sometimes... And here in the States, that's against the law. We have the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you can't discriminate against a person based on their disability.
Okay.
And it's hard to prove. And so a lot of times when you go into an interview and you walk into the interview and you're blind, and so you're interviewing the guy, whatever the job is, and he might ask you questions about how you can do the job, and you might say, well, I might need this accommodation, maybe I'm gonna need, let's say it's a job in like a call center and maybe you use a computer, but like, well, I'm gonna need to put JAWS on my computer that I use for work, or something like that, or, whatever it is. And so a lot of times they're hesitant to, I think, what am I trying to say? It's like it's maybe too much trouble for them to do the accommodation. Now, of course, they're not going to say, well, I'm not going to hire you because you're blind and I don't want to do the accommodation because that's against the law. But, it's hard to prove if they interview like 10 guys and there's 3 spots and they hire 3 guys and they don't hire the blind person, it's hard for me as a blind person to prove, well, they didn't hire me because I'm blind.
It's true.
So there's that. And also I think a lot of times a lot of blind people they think that way themselves. They feel like, I'm blind, I can't do anything. Because to be honest, I felt that way when I first went blind. I felt like my life was over and I couldn't do anything and stuff like that. And a lot of blind people feel that way.
A lot of depression, yeah.
Yes, and some of them never get over it. Some of them never get past that. And part of it is because they don't, they just can't, they can never really get past the original, the issue of going blind, and nobody encourages them. No one is saying, you can do this, that, and the other thing, and you could definitely go to work if you really want to. You know what I mean? There's ways to do it. They need, a lot of times people need to be encouraged a little bit, maybe by their family or their close friends. And a lot of times when a person goes blind, a lot of the people that they were close with, they pull back from them. And,
I see.
So it's hard. Like for me, I didn't really have that issue. And what I realized after a little while, at first when it happened, and I was like, I said, people aren't gonna want to, go out with me and do this or that with me because I'm blind now. But what I didn't really realize, and I thought about it later on, is most of my friends and people I'm close with are sighted people. And I'm visually impaired. I've always been visually impaired. To them, I'm pretty much blind already. So even though I went blind and it was a huge change for me, maybe it's not such a big change for them. Because really, I didn't have that issue. My friends didn't pull back from me or any of that, But for a person who is sighted and they go from fully and perfectly sighted to blind, that's a bigger adjustment. And maybe some of their friends couldn't handle it because they were all sighted people and they're not used to it. So that's a hard thing. But going back to the job thing, I think so. People don't want to hire necessarily a blind person. The blind person doesn't necessarily feel like they can work, or they're not motivated to go out and develop the skills they need to be able to work, because it is hard, especially when you first do it. The more you do it, the easier it gets. The first time you, as a blind person, go out of your house on your own and go to wherever it is that you need to go. Maybe you went to the store to buy some food, or just going to visit a friend and you had to ride the bus or anything. It's hard and it's kind of scary.
For sure.
If you never did it, if you never did it, it's very scary, and so a lot of people they're intimidated and they don't do it. But the more you do it, the more comfortable it is.
It is, yeah.
You know, the more you do it, the easier it is. You get to where you develop a routine just like anything else. You know where the bus stop is.
Mm-hmm.
You know how the buses run, and you get used to it. And you're comfortable if you need to ask the driver. You ask the driver, be like, I need to get off at this street. Can you let me know when we're there?
Mm-hmm.
Which in my city, I'm very lucky. We have the smart buses, so the bus tells you what street it's on, which is very nice.
Mm-hmm.
But in some cities they don't have that, and so you'd have to speak to the driver. Or maybe if you have, maybe you use your phone and you can use the GPS. That will help, because it tells you where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that are kind of stacked against us, but the more you do them,
The more you
gets.
get, yeah.
So I think those are really the biggest thing. The other thing, and this kind of touches on maybe something that maybe people aren't always comfortable with. A lot of blind people, and I don't know the number off the top of my head,
Mm-hmm.
but many people who are blind also have another disability.
Mm-hmm.
They may have a developmental disability, or maybe they're deaf, or maybe they have a physical disability or whatever. But whatever it is, and when you have two disabilities, that makes it that much harder. You know what I mean? Like for a blind person, if the only thing I have that's different than the other person is that I'm blind.
Exactly.
Well, I can still use my ears. You know what I mean? So I can use my sense of hearing to help me get around and for orientation, and to use the computer and to use mobile devices and different things. Well, if I'm deaf and blind, then I don't have that. The only thing I have is my sense of touch. And there are ways to communicate that way, but it's very difficult to me. Like I'm so impressed with people who are both deaf and blind, and who find a way to learn and to communicate. Like to me that's amazing. But then again, to them, it's just what they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So to them, it's not amazing. It's just their life.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, but it is a lot. It's a lot harder because it's that much more that you need to learn, and it's that much less sensory input that you have to learn with. So it's difficult. So when you have something else, when you have another disability along with your blindness,
Mm-hmm.
That just makes it that much harder. If you have a learning disability, part of learning how to do things as a blind person is, that's exactly what you do. You learn. You learn how to be, mobile and how to be independent. You learn how to read Braille. You learn how to use screen readers. You learn how to do, so if you have an issue, if you have a mental issue, then it makes it that much more difficult for you to learn. And that's the case, a lot of, as I was saying, a lot of blind people do have multiple disabilities.
Yeah.
And so that being the case, so me as a blind person, I'm not going to look at someone else who has an additional disability and say, well, you should be out there working. You know what I mean? I'm not going to judge them, and I'm not going to say, you need to get out there and work. But speaking for myself as a blind person, and for other people who are blind like myself, but our only obstacle is our blindness. We need to find ways to be independent. And for that, I feel like I can speak to, because now I'm speaking about people who are in the same boat as I am.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We need to find ways to be productive. We need to advocate for ourselves. When we go to, when we want to start working, maybe someone in our family says, you're blind, you don't need to work. I can take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you want, then that's fine. But if that's not what you want, you need to speak up for yourself. A lot of blind people aren't willing to advocate for themselves.
So be advocate for yourself.
It's a really big issue. You need to say, this is what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to, that's true of all people. Everyone needs to advocate for themselves. We all need to be, our own advocate, because no one else is going to do it for us. Whether we're sighted or blind, or or deaf, or whether we have whatever disabilities or difficulties that we might have. We all need to advocate for ourselves, because no one else is going to do it. So and so when it comes time to go to work, when you go to school and you go to university, and you want to do a particular program in university, and you say, this is the career that I want to do, so I want to enroll in this program. And if you get any pushback, they say, well, you're blind, you can't do that. Be like, no, yes, I can do it. Tell me what it is that I'm going to need to do to complete this program, and I will tell you how I can do it. You know, it's up to us
to speak up.
Be able to, yes. And you know, and if someone asks us how are we going to do it, we need to have an answer for them. Or if we don't have an answer for them right away, we need to be able to come back with them the next day. You know, for example, you know, like, you know, for a lot of people who are younger and they're going to university, you know, you need to be able to go to your advisor and say, I want to do this program. You know, this is the accommodation I'm going to need. But with this accommodation, I can complete the program and I can do the job that I'm training for. And I mean, you need to be realistic.
For sure.
You know, you need to do your own research and find out, you know, do blind people do this job? And if they do, how do they do it? You know, the information is there. You know, we're all lucky. We have all the resources. We can find that information. It's not like back in the day when we had to read it in a book somewhere, or we had to rely on, you know, just talking to other people, networking. You know, we can go out and we can find the information is there. We can find out how does a blind person teach? You know, we can find a blind person who's a teacher and we can find out how they do it. And then we can go to, you know, if we're trying to get a job in a school system, we can say, well, here's this man or this lady, you know, she's a teacher and this is how she does it. You know, this is the equipment that she uses. These are the accommodations she needs, and she's successful, and we can do it too. So to me, that's the biggest thing, because the other things are out of our control. You know, like we can't control, you know, if we do have a second, you know, difficulty, we can't control that. We can't control how someone looks at us during the interview process.
Visual to blindness.